Good morning, New Life Church. Our mission and vision at New Life Church is to assist you and your family in becoming fully devoted followers of Christ. We have opportunities for you to take the next steps in your relationship with Christ. You can explore these options by texting RUS to 88,000 or by simply filling out the Connect card in the seat back in front of you. We are so passionate about investing in the next generation, and some of our best ministries are happening right now in Little Life, Kid Life, and Youth Middle. There's a team of pastors, leaders, and volunteers ready to assist your children in becoming fully devoted followers of Christ. If you keep them in here with you throughout the service, all we ask is that you be respectful of the people around you and not let them become a distraction to the service experience. If needed, you are welcome to take them out to the foyer where you can still experience a service in the seating areas provided. Now let's jump into today's message.
It's on. Okay, look. This is exactly what's going on. I've been here long enough that Pastor Mark is away, and Caleb is in BB. So I'm like the kid that is barely old enough to not need a babysitter. It's going to be awesome. Today's going to be so fun. I know how to use these microphones. Man, that is hilarious. Drew, I'm sorry. You told me it wasn't on, and I didn't listen. Okay, Cinco de Mayo. Happy Cinco de Mayo. I would encourage everybody to go to Bocadillos in Dardanelle and get a mango nata if you've never had one. I really hope that that's what we get when we walk through the gates at heaven, because they are so stinking good. I wanted to bring my phone up here, and I wanted to FaceTime Pastor Mark because Leslie is holding him hostage at the beach somewhere. I have no idea where they're at. But I wanted to FaceTime him and be like, hey, all these people wanted to say that our church loves you and is praying for you. And then he was like, Seth, bring me home. Seth, come get me. Mimi's being so mean. But I told y'all we're going to have fun. We don't have any babysitters today. It's going to be fun. So I wanted to do that, but I also don't know what time zone they're in, so who knows if he's even awake right now. I mean, that's a lie. He's definitely awake. But I didn't want to bring my phone up here. But in all seriousness, can we all agree that we have the most amazing pastors ever? They're amazing. They love us. They encourage us. One of my favorite things about Pastor Mark is he's an encourager. And if you've never been in his office, he has this sign, this little painting in his office, and it says, win the world with encouragement. And I think he does that day in and day out. Melvin, stop texting me. We're in church. Lord. He does that day in and day out. And also I want to give it up for the Johnsons, Kevin and Amanda, all that they do around here. Come on, let's give our other pastors, Kevin and Amanda. They're so great. We love them so much. I'm super excited to be finishing this series in Philippians. But before we get all the way into this, I need to highlight two more things, and I promise we're going to get into the Word. First, we had our family swim night last night. Our Young Families Ministry, the Basses, and their whole team put on an amazing event last night at the Aquatic Center. We got to take Ellie, and the first time we took her around some water, it was not great. She cried a lot, but there was sand involved, and nobody really likes that. But last night we went, and there was pizza, and there was dozens and dozens of families that showed up to the Aquatic Center. We got to hang out. We got to eat pizza. And the dads, they had this big obstacle course out in the pool, and the dads, there's a little competition still in all of us, so we kicked the kids to the side, and we were all racing through the obstacle course, having fun, and then we'd have to get off because we couldn't breathe and go eat some pizza. But give it up for the Basses and the Young Families team. They're incredible. Super good, super good. And this is, I have to do this. I'm not a guest speaker, and many of you spend more time with my kid than I spend with my kid, but we have to put her on the screen. We've got to put Ellie on the screen. There she is. Look at those little chipmunk teeth. Oh, my gosh. She's like a little woodchuck crawling around the house. I love it so much. She is so much fun. My mom's on the front row, and y'all need to pray for my mom because everybody, she tells me and Sav that Ellie is like me. Thank you. You did good. You did good. She's wild. She has a lot of personality. Somebody told me a couple weeks ago that their personality really kicks in around 18 months. And I looked this guy dead in the face, and I said, look, dude, she's got enough. We can't handle more in 6 months. I appreciate you saying that, but she's good. But next week is Mother's Day, and it is going to be fantastic. So all you moms and grandmas, come back next week. We're going to celebrate you. It is going to be fantastic. And one thing that I've learned from that little piece of joy right there is that Sav does way more than me in the year. Like, because of this, like, Sav just does way more than me, and I'm aware of that, and I acknowledge that, and I tell Sav that often. So next week, we're going to celebrate all the moms and grandmas for all that they do, and my mom's right here, and I'm going to tell her how thankful I am for her, because believe it or not, my mom put up with a lot because of my sister. All right, we're going to jump into this. We're going to be in Philippians chapter 4, verse 10. Philippians chapter 4, verse 10. My sister snuck out. I never snuck out one time. Okay, chapter 4, verse 10. I praise the Lord that you're concerned about me again. I know you've always been concerned about me, but didn't have the chance to help me. Not that I was ever in need, for I've learned to be content with whatever I have. I know how to live on almost nothing or with everything. I've learned the secret of living in every situation, whether it's with a full stomach or empty stomach, with plenty or with little. For I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength. Paul is ending the book of Philippians by thanking the church at Philippi for blessing him with a gift. And you've got to remember, he's in prison. So these people sent him a gift while he's in prison. And Paul writes in a letter, and he's talking about gratitude and contentment. Think about how wild that is. One of the biggest traps we are all vulnerable to is discontentment. If you're taking notes, you can write it at the top of your notes today. That's the theme of what we're going to be talking about, is being content or contentment. One of the biggest traps, or one of the things we're all most vulnerable to, is discontentment. Discontentment is a lack of satisfaction with one's possessions, status, or situation. In life, there is a constant temptation to want more, to want better, to want newer, to want nicer, to want different things. The temptation applies to all of us. It applies to young people. Newer clothes, newer shoes, newer phones, newer iPads, newer whatever. But it also applies to the generations on this side of the room. A newer house, a newer car, a nicer this. Whatever it may be. Contentment and discontentment applies to every single one of us in the room. I would say that discontentment is a major influence to many of the issues in all of our lives. Issues within ourselves could probably be traced back to discontentment. Issues within our marriage could probably be traced back to discontentment. Issues within our job could be traced back to discontentment. In this passage we just read, Paul is encouraging and challenging us to choose contentment. But Seth, how do you choose contentment? We're going to look at 3 ways we can learn to be content in our lives in these few verses. The first way is to renew our concern for others. We're going to renew our concern for others. The church at Philippi had blessed Paul with a gift while he was in prison. They saw his need. He was in prison. He needed something. And they met his need. They were concerned for him. Actually, Paul says they were concerned for him again. The NIV translation, I read out of the NLT, but the NIV says that they renewed their concern for him. And that word renewed can be defined as revive, to flourish again, or grow green again. This lets us know that our concern for others has a tendency to fade and fall off. And I think anybody in this room can agree that we all get busy. There are seasons of our life where other people's needs aren't as much of a priority as our own needs are. But Paul's reminding us here that this is something that we must continually strive to keep in front of us. And Paul is a great example of this. He was constantly praying for other people. He was constantly encouraging churches. He was constantly helping other people in need. He was constantly fathering younger apostles and disciples. We read about this all throughout the New Testament. It's amazing how he connects this renewed concern for people with contentment. He says that if we can renew our concern for people, it will help us to live a more content life. Part of learning to be content is remembering life isn't all about us. When we focus on ourselves, when we take the focus off of ourselves and place it on others, it helps us be content. Paul says something similar to this in Phillipians chapter 2, verse 4. Don't look out only for your own interest, but take an interest in others too. Paul's saying it's not always all about us. We've got to take care and look out for the people around us. I have a list of guys in my office. I've got it on the little note card, and I keep it in my desk. And most of the time, I take my note card out of my desk, and I set it on top of my desk. And I just spend time texting this group of guys that's on my note card. And I feel like I have a really good relationship with all of them. And I ask them hard questions. I text them. And I see how they're doing. I ask about school. I ask about work. I ask about family. I ask about relationships. I ask how their battle with their temptation is going. Like, I ask these guys really honest questions. And they give me really honest answers. And on the days where I spend a few hours talking back and forth with these guys, I'm so content. Like, I can just sit in my office and wait for my phone to ring, and nothing else in the world matters. Because the Lord reminds me I'm not the only one that's busy. He reminds me I'm not the only one that struggles. He reminds me I'm not the only one that worries. But in these conversations with these high school and college guys, he also reminds me how far he's brought me from when I was in high school and when I was in college. And I find myself so content with the life God has given me. And I would say that we should all be asking these questions a lot more. I should get another note card and text these people. We should all be asking questions like, hey, how can I pray for you? How are you doing? What can I do to help you? Because the more time we spend listening to others and lifting them up in prayer and encouraging them, it will renew our concern for them, and we'll be able to live a more content life. So I want to ask you a question. Who is someone you need to renew your concern for? Who is someone that you need to renew your concern for? Who is someone who is going through something hard right now? Like, you are aware that they're going through a hard situation. Who is someone who God keeps bringing to your heart and your mind? I was in the middle of something the other day, and this football player just popped in my head. So I texted him. And I found out nothing was really going on, but he was about to go home. And he was excited. And he was going to get to spend some time home. And I was like, hey, man, how can I pray for you? And he sent me a really beautiful prayer request. And I just thanked the Lord. It's like, hey, thanks for putting this guy on my heart. Who is someone who you used to check in on, but you haven't checked in on in a while? Call them, text them, reach out to them, pray for them. Do something to renew your concern for them. You know, this is why the church serves on a weekly basis. It's a spiritual alarm clock for our souls that forces us to be intentional and prioritize others over ourselves, just like the Bible instructs. When we do this, when we put other people's needs above our own, God can do this amazing thing where he takes frustration and transforms it into compassion. He does an amazing work in our hearts and minds when we choose to renew our concern for others. God isn't asking us to have a concern for everybody. God is saying, hey, I've given you a specific group of people that I want you to renew your concern for them. I'm going to be concerned about everybody. But we all have people in our life that he's saying, hey, I want you to renew your concern for maybe this one person. Maybe it's a small group of people. Maybe it's a people at your work. Maybe it's a group of your chemistry lab people. I don't know. We all need concern for them. I never went to labs, but I got a degree. So go to your labs. I don't know who your people are. But I would feel very confident that there are names or faces running through your mind right now of people that you used to have really strong relationships with. Pray for those people. If you don't have a strong relationship with them right now, start praying for them. Renew your concern for them that way. If you do have a good relationship with them, shoot them a text, call them. Renew your concern for others. Number 2. This one's fun. We've got to pursue the secret of contentment. We've got to pursue the secret of contentment. Let's read verses 11 and 12 real fast. Not that I was ever in need, which is hilarious coming from this guy who was shipwrecked multiple times. He was stoned. He was beaten. He got beaten with rods, all this kind of stuff. And he said, not that I was ever in need. For I've learned how to be content with whatever I have. I know how to live on almost nothing or with everything. I've learned the secret of living in every situation, whether it's with a full stomach or empty or plenty or with little. No one is born content. Can we all agree with that? No one is born content. When Ellie came out, she was mad. She came straight out mad. She wanted to be held. She wanted some food. She didn't want the little, they put the hat, they put the little striped hat. She hated the hat. She said, get that thing off me right now. And then we learned that she needed to have it on. So we're like, listen, girl, first lesson in life, you need that, even though you don't like it. We don't naturally lean towards contentment and satisfaction. Just as human beings, that's not something that we wake up and naturally desire. For those of us who have kids and grandkids, we all know when the little cup runs out of puffs, they run out of contentment. When the chicken nuggets are gone, it's over. Contentment's over. When you have to leave the swim party, contentment's over. When the friends have to go home for the weekend, contentment's over. When you have to wear your shoes on the right feet, contentment's over. We all know that little kids lose their contentment so fast. And nobody teaches them that. They just naturally get frustrated. This girl, Ellie, man, she is so funny. If you want her to not be content, it has to do with food. She is just like her mom. Don't let these little bodies fool you. They can hold some food. And as soon as the food's over, she's done. We've got to do something else. We've got to go for a walk. We've got to get the dog. We've got to do something to bring the contentment back. Contentment is something we must learn and look for in life. That's why adults understand contentment and kids don't. Because we're older. We've learned more. We've gone through life. We know what to look for. Paul understood this. He had experienced it all. Being in need and having plenty, being hungry and being well fed, being celebrated and being stoned. And in these 2 verses, he said that he has learned to be content no matter what the circumstances. Because this dude was rich and famous. He had it all. He could do whatever he wanted, wherever he wanted. He was in charge of people. He was a great leader. He did all these things whenever he was a Pharisee. He had all the privileges. And he threw it all away to follow Jesus. That's when he learned to be content with his life, when he gave up his riches and his fame to follow Jesus. He said that he learned to be content no matter the circumstance. And then in verse 12, he says, he learned the secret. When we talk about learning in any form, it can be described as a pursuit. Pursuit of knowledge, pursuit of wisdom, pursuit of skill. To learn the secret of contentment, we must pursue it. And if we're talking about pursuit, it reminds me of deer hunting. I'm going to talk to some Arkansas people like an Arkansas person talks to you. We're not going to use professional football illustrations. We're not going to talk about the Steelers. We're going to talk about the deer woods. Because that's what it is. When that deer shows up on camera, it's over. That's all we think about. That deer takes up all the extra brain space in our head. Wives are nudging their husbands right now. Because when that deer shows up, the pursuit is on. And most of the time, the pursuit's on when there's no deer. But when the deer shows up, we go out and we put a few more cameras. We study the pictures. What time is it? What temperature is it? Was it raining? Was it cloudy? Was there another deer with him? All right, he shows up at 8:52 every night, and there's a small 3-point right behind him. We know this kind of stuff. We study it like it's neuroscience, trying to come up with the perfect plan to be in the woods when that deer is also in the woods. We watch the weather more closely. We decide the perfect wind direction. We decide the perfect tree. We are constantly trying to put ourselves in the best position to be at the right place at the right time. The pursuit is what keeps us coming back. What if we pursued the secret of contentment like that? My goodness, if I pursued contentment like I pursued that deer a couple years ago, it will always be easier to want more. It will always be easier to want something better, to want something different, to want something newer. But just because it's easier doesn't mean it's right. Instead of searching for something else, let's passionately seek God and ask Him to help us learn the secret of contentment for the here and the now. Contentment isn't a destination you arrive at. It's a secret that we find. In every situation, contentment can be found if searched for. It's not about more of this or less of that. It's not about the past. It's not about what's in the future. It's about being faithful and thankful and teachable in what God is doing today. That is contentment. Being faithful, thankful, and teachable about what God is doing today. And number 3, we've got to depend on Jesus' strength. If we're going to find true contentment, we've got to depend on Jesus' strength. And now the moment that we've all been waiting for. Phillipians 4:13. For I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. You know, it's hilarious. I actually talked about this a couple weeks ago to the youth and college students. I talked about being content. And I searched and searched and searched. I went so deep in my mom's Facebook pictures. I did. But I could not find, I had a senior picture. You know, we all have really embarrassing senior pictures. But my senior picture, I was in a parking garage because that was cool in 2014. I was in a parking garage and I had my basketball shoes. I was standing like this. I had my basketball shoes and I was holding them like sideways, and Philippians 4:13 real big across the sole of my shoe. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. I had no idea that Paul was in jail and he was talking about being content in life and loving Jesus with all of his heart, soul, mind, and strength when he wrote this. This is arguably the most misquoted verse in the entire Bible. It's not saying that God will give us the strength to win every basketball game when I wear those orange shoes. Paul is saying that through the strength Christ gives us, we're able to do His will. We are able to follow His ways. We are able to follow Jesus every single day. It's strength to be content in whatever God has for us. Think about that for a minute. This is coming from a guy who was in prison in 60 to 62 AD. Like, this man was not getting 3 meals a day and getting some time in the yard. Like, this was not prison today. And he wrote this. He said, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. I can sit in this jail cell and I can encourage you through this letter, and I can continue to pray, and I can continue to encourage guards, and I can continue to do all of these things even though my current situation is terrible and I'm being mistreated and I'm probably being made fun of and spit on and mocked. And I'm going to tell all of you that you can do this. You can do more than me because you're not in jail. Through the strength that Christ gives. We must learn that we can't have true contentment without God's strength. We must learn to depend on Jesus for strength and not try to do it on our own strength. And if you're struggling with contentment today, what would it look like for you to fully depend on Jesus for strength? To depend on someone means to rely on them, to trust them, and to put your confidence in them. What's stopping you from depending on Jesus this way? Thankfully, Jesus is the most dependable person who ever lived. This isn't in my notes, but I think it's funny. Sav and I learned to be content when we first got married. And we didn't have nothing. I was going to make $11,000 in our first year of marriage. We were struggling. But I tell people all the time that I loved our first couple years of marriage. I loved getting married super young because it taught us so much. Like, it taught us how to rely on the Lord. It taught us how to cook. It taught us how to not spend money on other things. It taught us how to enjoy time with each other. Like, through our relationship with Jesus, we learned just because we don't have a lot of money doesn't mean that we can't have a content and great life. We were surrounded by amazing people, and God revealed that. He said, who cares if you don't have a lot of money? You have people that love you. You're surrounded by a great community. And we leaned on Jesus, especially the first year. Lord, have mercy. Some of the students know this, but the majority of you probably don't know this. But I have a friend who's in prison here in Arkansas, and we write each other letters. And it's one of my favorite things about my job. Sometimes I look forward to writing a letter or reading a letter more than anything else, especially when it's been a hard couple of days or weeks. Like, I cherish these letters, and I cherish this friendship that I've made with this guy. And I'm like a little kid at Christmas. Every time somebody checks the mail, I'm like, did he write me a letter? Did my buddy write me back? Did I get a letter? And I get so excited because I love this guy's story. He reached out to New Life Church. I don't know, we've been writing each other's letters, over a year? He reached out to the church over a year ago. In his first letter, he told me how he got saved in his jail cell. Like, he got put in jail, and he was at rock bottom, and he didn't know what was going to happen to his life, and he was really struggling. And he said that he had an encounter with the Lord. He didn't even know Jesus, but he said in his jail cell he had an encounter with the Lord. And he said he was in the floor, and when he got up off the floor, he said, I've got to change my life. So he wrote letters reaching out to people. And he was asking for a Bible. He was writing letters to churches asking for a Bible. And he said that he picked New Life Church because he remembered he heard somebody mention us one time. And in his first letter, I read his story. And I ran in Sav's office and I said, hey, I don't care what the budget is. We have got to buy a Bible. So I sent this guy a Bible. And that's where it all started. And we've been writing each other letters for a year, over a year. And every single time I read one of his letters, I really feel like I'm reading a letter from Paul. Because I'm talking to somebody that is in jail. And he is constantly talking about how good God is and how faithful God is and how the Holy Spirit revealed something to him through his personal study time, which is all the time. But his story is so inspiring. And I'm so thankful that I get to be a small part of it. He struggled with addiction, but since being incarcerated, he's gone through a recovery program. And in one of his letters about halfway, about 6 months in, he wrote me a letter, and it was really short. And he just said, "Hey, Seth, I need you to pray for my hearing." He said, "I got a hearing coming up. It's really big. I just need you to pray. I don't know how it's going to go. I feel good about it, but they could tell me no." So I wrote back and said, "Hey, man, I'll absolutely be praying for your hearing. Let me know if you need anything. Can't wait to, talk to you soon." So I did. I prayed a lot for this hearing, and I got a letter back, and it was a really long letter, like 4 pages. And he went to his hearing, and he got denied. And he told me that he was going to be in prison for a couple more years. And I was reading this letter, and I got discouraged. I was like, man, years. He said years of prison. And I was like, well, I guess we get to write more letters. So I'm just reading through this, and he's kind of walking me through the whole process, and I turn the page over, and he says, "But I think this is a blessing from God because it gives me an opportunity to get my GED, and I get to continue to preach the gospel to all the people in my cell block." He's probably the most content person that I know, and I've never met him face to face. He may be the most content person that I know, and he's in prison. But I can confidently say that my friend depends on Jesus' strength every single day. Sometimes I just pick up old letters and read them because they encourage me. I think we should all strive to be like my friend. No matter what our situation is, if we're in this room, it's not nearly as bad as his. But we can all look to Jesus as our strength. Here are 3 specific areas we can depend on Jesus for our strength. Number 1 is our perspective. Lack of contentment can be the result of lack of contentment often comes from a lack of perspective. My friend gives me fresh perspective every time I open a letter. We often focus on what we don't have instead of missing out on what we do have. Let's ask Jesus to help us see things that we are overlooking and help us see things the way he sees them. And then let's all thank God for all the things he's blessed us with and the way that he takes care of us. Number 2 is our priorities. Lack of contentment can be the result of misplaced priorities. We might be pursuing the wrong things and have stopped being faithful with what's right in front of us. We need to repent and ask Jesus to put our priorities back in line. And number 3, our source. Lack of contentment can be the result of doing things in our own strength. And can I just get a head nod of agreement? Doing things in our own strength is exhausting. But we do it so much. I do it so much. Jesus is our source of strength. He empowers us so that we can be content in all circumstances. Jesus said it this way in John 15:5. "I am the vine and you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in him, he will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing." A constant temptation we will face in life will be to want more, to want something better, to want something different, and want something new. It can be so easy to become discontent in life, but we can fight discontentment with these 3 things: renewing our concern for others, pursuing the secret of contentment, and depending on Jesus for our strength. Contentment brings peace and joy and fulfillment that only comes from Jesus. Paul had all of this despite what he went through. The brother got bit by a snake just trying to start a fire, and he was content. And I believe that God wants us to experience the same kind of contentment. It's something that the world desperately longs for, but it's looking for in all the wrong places. Let's all of us be the people who can confidently say, I have learned the secret of being content in any and every circumstance, and then share that fulfillment that comes from Jesus and Jesus alone with the people around us. I know that I'm not very old, and that many of you in this room have been content with your life longer than I've been alive. But this is just my prayer for so many of us, because you can tell when you're around a content person, and you can tell when you're around a discontent person. It's almost like content people don't have a care in the world. They care. Content people care. They just have so much peace that they're not swayed back and forth by all the things that's going on in the world, because Jesus is their source. Jesus is their rock and holds them steady. So I just pray that that's how we encourage the people that are around us this week, with content hearts, with content spirits, the fruits of contentment, peace and joy and fulfillment that can only come through Jesus. Let's pray with heads bowed and eyes closed.